So this year, I have done something relatively new for myself. I've gone around the west side here of the Portland area, and I've recorded and shared with you, urbanism and housing stock that has been recently been constructed and opened, and then obviously the plans that, like, say, the city of Beaverton via Bura, Bura, has in the works to be able to redevelop 5 different properties across downtown Beaverton. A lot of this obviously is via Metro as well, because the whole idea is they want to do as much as they can to do, fair and inclusive housing. So basically anything that is specialized under their special program that gets this extra funding, which is for people that are low income, people that are single mothers, obviously women escaping bad situations that need it, obviously homeless people, mentally ill people, anybody, immigrants, people who need potentially housing more than the average person, obviously, before anyone else, to get them off the streets, of course, and to hopefully help them therefore have an address so then they can have a job. And you get the idea, because that's the basis of how that works. There has been a lot of construction in 2025 across the area, and in 2024 actually, of brand new housing stock. The mass majority of it is focused on that exact type of housing. It's been averaging about roughly 4,500 units of new housing, most of it in that specialized, probably about 80% of it in that specialized category across the Portland metro area here in Oregon for the last handful of years. This year and last year, they've averaged closer to around 6,000 new units of housing that they've been able to complete and open up so that these people can get in there. This is important, of course, because we're going to be reviewing the discrepancies, the disagreement, the butting of heads between the argument that is always the emphasis on, oh, it's all about the housing crisis. That's the problem. We just don't have enough housing, and we need specialized housing for these people so that way they can get in and off the street, and all that's well and good. The problem is that's at the very surface. You're not actually figuring out what is the problem, what is the reason why you are on the street. That's a massive issue, obviously. So that's the first thing that you have to consider, because obviously people just think, oh, off street, good, now they have a roof over their head. That's not remotely sufficient, especially considering they do this every few years. I think the last time they did it was in 2020, I think. I'm pretty sure it was 2020, because I think that was also the year that November Measure 110 got voted to pass, and then it wasn't anything like they promised. It was actually exactly a bastardization and a hyper simplified version of it, where they're like, hey, let's skip all the necessary steps to set up, addiction treatment centers and addiction treatment programs and trainings and everything else for these people that desperately need it. Let's throw that all out the window. Let's just instantly jump to the last step, which is decriminalization of hard drugs. And of course, that fucking morbidly backfired, as I said it would before it even got voted in favor of. And everything I said would happen did happen. And I have great experience, unfortunately, with addictions, because my eldest brother, Nathan, was a hyper addictive personality. He could get addicted to just about anything, and his whole shtick, his drug of choice, was meth. And that's exactly what they found in 2020. When they asked all these different homeless people, what is your drug of choice? Because almost all of them were on drugs of some kind. They always said it was meth. And so they're like, okay, why methamphetamine specifically? Because it's the same reason that Adolf Hitler, same reasons that he did that. He experimented and they created meth so that way they could stay awake and be way more energized for obscene amounts of time, days and nights straight, without ever having to rest, so that way they could do way more than everyone else on the battlefield. That was the simple way of doing it. Then, of course, they had to kind of modify heroin. I think it's heroin as a downer, to make them come back down and then go to sleep from their meth highs, because then they got too psychotic or whatever. It was a whole thing. Anyway, my brother's sugar choice was meth. And he knew all the ins and outs, and including exactly how to make it, what to cut it with, what never to cut it with. He knew every single drug dealer in the area, all the way up through the people who literally ran the pins, the rings. So I'm 100% confident that he was absolutely a CI before he if and or'd. If you don't know the story, you don't know the story. Anyway, CI, of course, is confidential informant, and it would have been in that way. So I have a stupid amount of experience with this whole addiction thing. And so I knew, because again, it's inherently obvious. Why would homeless people in 2020, let alone in 2025 in Portland, Oregon, consistently choose, in the Portland area, consistently choose meth over all of the drugs to do while they're out on the streets? Well, like, you know who, in Germany back in the day, there was a purpose to it. They needed to stay up, and they need to stay up, and they need to be vigilant, and they basically can never let themselves sleep, because if they do that, there's always the even more idiotic assholes that are also homeless that are going to go and take advantage of them, and or their dog or pet that they might have as a companion, or of course, and this is the most important reason why, and the most consistent reason why they list, is because they're trying to protect what little they even own and have to live with. Whether it's a shopping cart they absconded with that has, you know, a tarp or two and maybe some poles or something to use to pin up that tarp for protection, you know, for safety, for whatever the heck it is, right? Or that's what they take that drug for. Because obviously none of the other ones genuinely, they really just don't help these people at all, and that's obviously a major problem. But then obviously meth is one of the absolute most monstrous, worst, evil fucking hard drugs you could ever touch in your life. God, it literally fucking liquidates your body slowly from the inside out. It does all the worst possible things. It is a brutal, brutal drug to take. Even though it's somewhat understandable as to why these people, you know, the average person, that's why they want to make sure that, you know, they're taking it, is because, again, it's protecting their what little they own, and that's totally understandable. I mean, you basically have nothing anyway. What little you have, you're going to try to protect with your life. That's always a huge problem. So that's a huge issue with the homelessness thing, is nobody wants to address the elephant in the room, which is that the majority of them are addicts, especially of meth. And unfortunately, a majority of them also are mentally ill. Most of the people that are homeless in the Portland metropolitan area are at least mentally ill, at least an addict, or both. And that's obviously a big fucking problem, because now you have to attack the root of their problem and the cause of their homelessness that way. Meaning you have to go after the root, and the root is the mental illness and or the addiction. Because otherwise, they're never going to be able to keep their housing. An important thing about the addict's mind is that addicts constantly self-sabotage. Any single time that they end up, especially meth heads actually, every single time that they end up having an opportunity that they're trying to seize in the moment, and they're about to go seize it, and they're about to finally have a great opportunity to be able to get themselves the money and the income, or get themselves the opportunity to get help and better their lives and make themselves safer, they throw it away immediately, because they have to self-sabotage, because they are some of the most insecure and panicked people you will ever come across, especially when it's about themselves and bettering themselves in their lives. They are absolutely the most wildly paranoid people when it comes down to, and distrusting people when it comes down to that stuff. Why? Because they know they cannot trust themselves or their mind. They cannot do it because they are such an addict. They know what's gonna fucking happen. They're gonna fucking use that money the way that they know they can't let themselves, and that's to feed the fucking addiction. It's gonna feed other problems, and they know it's going to do that. And so that's why you talk to almost any of them that have been addicts for long enough, they will tell you that's what they keep doing. They sabotage because they cannot trust themselves to effectively take care of themselves, or to handle their own money, or whatever else. That's also why usually these people also will have payees, because court mandates it. It's a mess. So even if you give them housing, there's still a very strong chance they're just not going to be in the right headspace, or have the experience in life, and thus the self-trust to be able to go out there and accept that and actually do what else needs to be done to be able to maintain it. They're going to self-sabotage. One way or another, it is inevitable. It happens with all sorts of addicts, but especially the meth heads seem to do it the most. And again, there is a statistic. I'd have to fucking inquire to my mom because she's the one to tip me off to the fact that they did it again. So it seems like every 5 years they must, no local outlets must go around and do that survey of homeless people. But anyway, they go around, they question homeless people, and they ask them, "What's your drug of choice?" Or if they do drugs, and then most of them say yes, and then like, "What is your drug that you choose to use, or that you use the most, or that you just use?" And every single time it's meth. And the reason why is always labeled the same: 2020, 2015, 2025. It doesn't matter. It's to keep themselves awake, to protect what little that they have and or themselves. Despite the fact that, especially during the pandemic, they were, including city officials and state and everyone else and the federal government, were all insisting and demanding that anyone was lying if they claimed that it wasn't fentanyl. And that fentanyl did not weigh it. But then actually, if you paid attention to like all the different drug busts that they've been doing over the last 5 years across the metro area, especially the last 3 years, every fucking time, no matter where it was done at, they always find by far the majority of the drugs in these dens are and is meth, different forms of meth. It just is methamphetamine because it is still the dominant drug. By the way, it also, I should mention this, that also proves another fact, is that meth is incredibly cheap and easy to access. Not only is it plentiful, but drug dealers clearly do not charge that much overall for it compared to potentially some other drugs. That's why people that are on, the Oregon Trail card, I think it's like between $50 and like $250 or something like that you get a month. People that are on that and or SSI, Social Security income, which most of these people would be, especially if they're mentally ill, they'll make anywhere between, $500, $400, $500 a month, and upwards of, I think it's like $1,600 a month is the max you can get. It's $1,200 or $1,600 a month right now because it went up apparently this year. And even with only that much income, just off of that, and then the payee ship that then limits it even more each month, and they access to it, they still can go out and buy meth as much and use it as much as they fucking want. And a lot of these people can OD because it doesn't take that much of meth to do that. Willamette Weekly, of course, emphasizes the funds that have been raised since 2021. So it's 4 years of funds, $1.3 billion. That's no little amount, even for 4 years. That is a vast amount. I guess it's technically discrepancy number 2, because I already mentioned the housing stock thing. Discrepancy number 2 is the funds that they've raised, right? And all the different programs that they have, and the shelters and everything else, and the supposedly permanent housing that they're building, or when they renovate a place for that. Like there's a place here in Aloha off of 198th and TV Highway. So, you have all sorts of different ways that they do it. And yet, despite that increase in that stock, nothing. We still have an increase. All that funds still have an increase. You have the specialized housing, still have an increase. Vast amounts of shelter increase, doesn't matter. Still have an increase in homeless. It clearly has a lot more nuance to it than people want to think of it to have, or admit that it has, to be able to have anywhere near a head start, or even get a start in the first place towards making progress to fixing this issue. I'd almost argue it's by design, because actually some of these things feature hold proudly, like a Berkshire Hathaway one, which would be this one. Berkshire Hathaway is here. If you scroll up, it's like featuring, of course it goes all the way back to 2020 for some weird reason, and then it randomly has like 2023 and 2024 stuff in it. It's really bizarre. The majority of it's 2020, so it's like they just got lazy with it, and they're like, here, we'll update various random sections here and there of sections. It's stupid, but if you keep going up, like, they're like, oh, hey, the wealth went way the fuck up overall. The income has gone way the fuck up overall in the Portland area. It's fucking amazing. Look at his resilience better than the national average. Look at the wages. 60% of workers are white collar. Fuck me in the anus and call me Mary Angelina, because that is bullshit. Unless they've literally lowered white collar wage, the baseline of white collar wages, so low that now somehow almost 3/4 of the population in the Portland, Vancouver metro area somehow can make white collar wages, which is total horseshit. I have a theory, maybe it's actually just they just maintained $100,000 and they just ignore everything else, which does not make any sense. But they tout that, and they tout, you know, the 34% of households earn $100,000 or more annually. But then see, if that's the case, if only 34% of people here in the Portland, Vancouver area earn 100,000 or more, then what the fuck are they considering white collar? They had to have lowered it again. So it wasn't 100,000, and obviously they lowered it again. So now maybe it's like, I don't know, what is it? They cut off $70,000 a year, and somehow above that you're white collar, which obviously is not true. Like, it just doesn't work modern day. But still, with these increases over the years, even through 2023 or 2024, it just keeps increasing every year in the wages, supposedly. In fact, I think it was 2026, was by 2026, so tomorrow, we're supposed to, in a few hours, we're supposed to reach an average of $85,473 a year average wage, which, like, cool, I guess. Like, okay, it increases every year, notably. Great, I guess, but like, that only emphasizes this discrepancy more, because it's like, okay, so the average person's earning more and more, like over $1,000 more every single year at this point, roughly, but it's like $600 to $1,000. I guess that's fine, but like, Jesus, mother of Christ, is that ever a massive, massive stratification of incomes? Because like, in situations, because how can that keep happening, and yet the homelessness keeps going up in tandem and in lockstep with it, even with the $1.3 billion in funding over the last 4 years, going on 5 now, and it hasn't made a dent. In fact, if anything, homelessness just keeps increasing more and more over time. It's just, it shows the incredible level of nuance to it, and you could try to claim you're being nuanced about it as a group, as a community, as an individual, and you're just not. You're not even still scratching the top of the iceberg, the tip of the iceberg, because it's so much more nuanced than even that. And that's like clearly true, because why do you think, even with the nuance that people are using now, especially in the Portland area, and the policies that are being made and everything, and altered and changed or expanded, and funding expanded, and yet it still keeps increasing each year? Because it doesn't matter what they're doing or how much more nuance they suppose they get, and it's still not obviously addressing the core and the heart of the problem, the heart of the matter, the root cause of this issue. Obviously, because like, if any of that was nuanced enough, and it actually touched on at least some of the hair roots off of the taproot, the key main root of a plant, in this case, you know, of the problem here, at least then you'd still see the slightest incremental progress forward. Something would finally start to shift in the favor of the programs and the funding. Hasn't happened, not even once yet. And this has been at least a decade, maybe a little more than a decade and a half, where the Portland area and Portland proper and Metro and everyone else has been doing these like inclusivity and these like homelessness effort programs and funding and everything else. And the main funding, that 1.3 billion that Willamette Week shows here, over the last 4 years ago, and housing services tax didn't help, not at all. So there is clearly a lot that has to shift and change before they'll ever start to make even the slightest progress forward and the slightest impact on this issue, because we're going too simplistic still. We're not addressing the true root of the cause of the problem. Oregonians especially voting Oregonians, have this one of the most infuriatingly illogical mentalities, which is that they just love to be as performative as possible. Oh my God, do they love to be publicly performative as possible, especially in sociopolitics. They love to be performative because they are entirely performative in nothing they performatively say and make the biggest to-do about, that they care so much about, and these people and these groups and this effort and this progress, this policy, they don't actually give a fuck at all. They just support it and vote for it because implicitly, just automatically without thought, because, oh, well, it makes me look better. It makes me feel better about myself, and therefore it makes me a great person because it proves I care. Well, do you? No, because like even I think it was 115, measure 115, no one, and I mean not a soul, fucking thought to ask the people in the incarcerated, the incarceration system, so the jails and potentially the prisons in Oregon, not a one of these people fucking thought to ask them. They're like, hey, how do you feel about the labor programs? That, by the way, let me ask you how it works, because I want to hear from the horse's mouth on the inside, how do these programs actually work? Because most people assumed it was modern slavery, you see, because they didn't pay you enough. And not only did they not pay you enough, because, you can't fucking buy anything in prison, for fuck's sake, you're behind bars. But on top of that, it's one of the dumbest and most illogical arguments. But on top of that, wait for it, they thought that they were forced against their will to do labor. And they weren't. At least not in Oregon. Maybe Crook County. Crook County, I hear, is wildly infamous as probably the most corrupt and brutalitarian incarceration jail and prison. Crook County. In the entire state. I hear by far the worst about it all the time. So odds are maybe there's something there to that. Because it would have to be on individual administrative levels for each jail or prison. The fact is that in Oregon, though, they have a clipboard. Usually it's going to be in the cafeteria, or like in the one of the laundry rooms or whatever, for them to be able to access and look at what are the upcoming jobs, when are they going to be, and see if they're interested in it. If they are, they can sign up for whichever one it is that they want to go into, and there's a chance that if that's not filled out yet, they're going to be a part of that. And there's nothing but good that can come out of that, because, especially for men, good God, because think about all the testosterone and all the angst and the anger and the roid rage and everything else that's innate to men biologically, being in a tiny cage, like a 3x4 or 5x5 fucking concrete and metal barred cage, every single hour of every single day for God knows how long your sentences are, especially in prison, because that's longer sentences, obviously, for more moderate crime levels. You're sitting there literally rotting away with literally nothing to do, being watched 24/7, 365, and you're stuck with a bunch of other idiot guys that all have anger issues and all have all this other weird testosterone shit or competitive problems, and the most you get to go to like eat in the cafeteria, still within all the concrete walls with like no windows anywhere. Just seriously put yourself in their shoes and then think, okay, I'm going to sign up to go clean up the roadside. I'm going to sign up to do landscaping. I'm going to sign up to do this job where I'm going to make license plates. I'm going to sign up for this job to do some, I don't know, ditch digging. Or I'm going to go sign up for this job where they're going to have us go and fight wildfires for them, because there's a bunch of raging wildfires and they just do not have the resources, the money, or the personnel to be able to fight them. So I'm going to sign up for that. None of them are forced into it. They just volunteer and they sign up for these things. But unfortunately, nobody in the voting public in Oregon ever stops to think about that or ask these people how it works. That is how it works. But nobody thinks to ask them, and nobody did ask them about it, nor did anybody think to ask them if they actually like the program or not, or if they personally support it. The actual people who they're supposedly saving from slavery. It's the dumbest thing. It makes no sense. Almost everyone in Oregon and even in California in these prison systems, actually in jails, actually fucking loved, I should say loved, because it's dead now, permanently, because it's written into the Constitution. So the dumbest things, that stupid measure, it pisses me off, actually, is that they didn't even ask them of that, and they loved it. Whenever they were asked, they're like, we fucking love this program. And the ones who didn't, literally were like, but that's fine, because I have a choice, and I chose, because I hate it, I don't want to fucking, I don't want to fucking go into do any labor, so fuck that. No, I'm not going to do it, which makes sense. They literally point out, it's like, we had the choice, personal choice, and we're just not going to do this thing because we hate it. It's, Cool, great. Like, but for the people who do want to do it, which is the majority of them, they loved it. They fucking loved it. Now they took that away. It's the same with like the fucking mental institutions. When Oregon further deinstitutionalized beyond the, I think it was the Reagan years. Jesus Christ, man! Like they're like they did the same thing with that because there was various hospitals. I think there's one up in like the North Portland area near Fairview or something like that. I think it was called Fairview, but anyway, there was like a big mental hospital up there, and they had introduced a handful of years prior to when everyone lost their minds over it because it's modern slavery. It's not okay. They they introduced programs to where they had these classes and they're hands-on, so they could actually get these practical skills like being able to garden, grow food, you know, whatever, prune, bonsai, whatever the fuck it was. There's different things they could do that were basic, they weren't intensive, and they were easy skills and valuable skills to pick up, including some survival skills. And they loved it because instead of being a prisoner just stuck in the same blank institutional white gross walls of these places, just drugged out of their fucking minds, and literally it's a prison. It functions exactly like prisons, except for the fact that they're not officially or legally considered prisoners, but literally it's no different than a jail. And the all those people that were there loved it. In fact, we saw the highest rates in the institutions that implemented those programs. We saw immediately, and I mean instantly, we saw the highest rates, of skyrocketing in rates that we'd never seen before in the institutions, mental institutions, of people being able to find some stability and sanity finally and actually get out because they became stable enough. And literally, it's not, correlation doesn't equal causation. It was literally causation. They literally know that because these people, when they were asked every time when they got out, said, and a lot of them had been there for years before that, and they said, we loved it. It was exactly what we needed, and it's literally the catalyst that got me out of there because it gave me, I finally could escape the walls. I finally felt useful for once, and that's something else that also the people in prisons and jails talk about a lot here in Oregon. Is when you ask them about it with the labor programs for them, it's the same exact sentiment. It's like it actually gave us something to fucking do for once. Like it calmed us down. It gave us feel valuable for once. And we learned some skills and stuff. It was great. It was necessary. And the reason why I mentioned that is because, again, that's the same with like 110 as well. I mean, it's the same. That's just how Oregonians' brains work when it comes down to sociopolitics, because it's always performative. They pretend and they convince themselves of their lie that, oh, I'm so supportive, I'm such a great person. Actually, you're probably one of the biggest prejudiced assholes in existence because of that, because you're fake as can be. You're literally so fake, you might as well be in LA right now. Like, seriously, you just go down to fucking LA. Become a valley girl, because they're as fake and shallow as can be too. Like they're so performative like that. You don't actually give a fuck at all, because if you did, you'd ask from the horse's mouths. At least, thankfully, when it comes down to the local media, a lot of times they'll go out there, or street roots as well, which is actually for homeless people, in fact, to make some money and be valuable and learn some social skills and stuff. It's their newspaper. They'll go out. Portland Mercury does this sometimes too, and they'll actually interview the homeless people and they'll ask them questions like that, because that's important thing to know. It's like, okay, so that way you can get another root cause of even more of their issues, right? Especially maybe they didn't have them before when they first became homeless, but now they are an addict because they became homeless, and now they had to take meth so they could feel safe enough to their things could feel protected. But then that creates another issue and another barrier and another heavy problem for them to be able to ever get back into a housing and work or whatever else again, because now they have an addiction. It's great to be able to interview the horses' mouths, right? Get the word from them and get their perspective and actually understand where's the root of this issue. Like what is, for the majority of people, what is going on here. And by the way, there is a big discrepancy, well, not a big discrepancy, but I think statistics wise, that is actually a pretty big difference. There's a notable difference, because I'm seeing a discrepancy in reporting where it's either 67 or 61% increase in homeless population. Simply put, there's no progress being made. No matter how many billions you raise, and spend, and how much effort you and staff you put up front to make this happen. You know, supportive housing and halfway houses and permanent houses and programs and everything else. It's not helping at all. It just isn't. Nothing has progressed whatsoever on this front. Nothing's helped. Homelessness in Multnomah County exclusively in 2023, 6,297. 2025, 10,526. Look at the raise too. It's only risen like an average of about 1,000 people each year since 2019. It's gonna average about 4K, it looks like. And then, yeah, it hits 2023 and then it just jumps to 10,000. So that's 2,000, 2,500 a year, roughly. Or two and a quarter thousand a year. All of a sudden. That's a stark jump in increase, man. And again, you have to remember, like, all the main biggest programs started in 2020 and 2021. That's when all the big aid programs, especially for homelessness and addicts and everything else and low income people, all of these programs really started, and they got the peak of their funds from 2020, 2021 forward through now. And yet, in direct correlation, you can see the discrepancy. Suddenly it went from an average of around, well, actually not even really averaging an increase for years, for over a decade, it looks like, or just about a decade. Yeah, for over a decade, or at least a decade, it just stayed plateaued. It stayed firm at like around, what, 4,000 people. And then right around the time that those programs start and the funding starts, it conveniently jumps from a plateau to averaging for, what is that, 3 years or 4 years? For 4 years, it averaged 1,000 people increase. And then it's now jumped to 2,250 a year. You can scream correlation doesn't equal causation as much as you fucking want, but at a certain point, coincidence doesn't coincidence anymore. This is a causation. There is very much a perfectly mutually exclusive link between whatever the fuck the programs are doing and the increase in homelessness. What it is, I don't know. That's what I'd love to figure out, is what is the root cause of this specifically, the actual discrepancies, because it's a really important question to ask. Like, okay, so we can figure out, and we already know technically the source of the homelessness problem, at least for the majority of them, and how you could, you know, implement like what programs they need and what things they need to be able to actually stabilize and trust themselves enough to be able to get up and get out of their terrible situations. But you can still research that more. But this is where we need to look into, is what the fuck happened here, because all these programs and the funding, including over $1 billion, is in effect in this time period for exactly trying to not just prevent but also reverse the homelessness epidemic. And instead, it seems to have fed it. It seems to have put gasoline on a raging bonfire. Like, what? How? Why? You need to figure out the causation here. Like, what is this correlation? What is the source of this? Because that is massively problematic for obvious reasons. Like, it just doesn't make any sense. Why is this discrepancy present, right? You have to look at that honestly and get as hyper detailed nuance as you can in your research to try to piece that together, because that is a puzzle that needs to be figured out, instead of just being sat upon and being like, well, I guess it just happened, let's just blame it on population increases, shall we? Yeah. No, don't be lazy. Just fucking actually put in the effort and figure it out. For the people that at least have the connections, and that's especially people connections, let alone resource connections, to be able to, and the math whiz minds and stuff, to be able to actually piece this together as a team. And again, also, sure, they're a lot more able to be able to go around and find out who's homeless and who's not now than ever and get a more accurate count. The thing is, I guarantee that they still haven't the fucking faintest clue, the slightest idea of the true amount of homeless people that exist across the Portland metro area, because it's higher than what they're showing. 12,000 I guarantee it's probably close to just 15 to 18,000 people at least are homeless in the Portland area. So this was also interesting too. Is this Window County homelessness as of October 25. So you'll notice something. It has 16,886 people as homeless versus the 12,042 or whatever the fuck it was that all the rest of the statistics have been reported of as of November 5th, which means they're technically getting this from the same sources. But you also see that even though it supposedly helped them be able to further contact and survey and identify the homeless people and actually get them displayed and listed, why the fuck, if that's the case, how the fuck is there still 4,000 plus people unaccounted for? And it's like, no, I don't know. I don't know. They could be alive or dead. They could be homeless. Maybe they figure something out. Maybe they moved somewhere else and were homeless elsewhere. I don't know. But we couldn't find 4,000 fucking people. They went missing. No, who cares? Whatever. Anyway, you're poor. You're dispossessed. We don't go in you. Fuck you. Basically 17,000 people are officially homeless. Because CPO obviously means they were homeless originally. And or potentially they aren't able to be categorized because sheltered, unsheltered, they do this calculation stuff, right? And then they define sheltered, unsheltered, because it's apparently a very different kind of homeless. What? In fact, actually, I would argue if you have shelter, especially if it's long-term or permanent, can you really be considered homeless? I would argue no, because homelessness necessarily to me requires you to be unsheltered. That's just me. I think that should be included, which of course means, yes, you should obviously be including people that are living in their cars or old dilapidated RVs or, you know, whatever else in a tent, because technically in tents is still technically shelter. Even if it leaks, it's still technically considered shelter. If they built themselves a little hut or a hovel, that's still technically shelter. But you can see how I think it's just really stupidly semantic and pedantic about it. That's what they do, though, unfortunately, with these things. And so they exclude or ignore certain other aspects or certain types. And it's like, what? And so those could also be the unknowns as well. It's like, oh, we can't categorize them. Inflow and outflow. It is the number of people who become homeless over a specific period. Outflow is the number of people banks that are homeless is the same period based on flow and outflow on people's interactions with homeless services. For example, if someone who has never accessed homeless services before goes to a shelter, they would be included in inflow. So basically, in other words, that's a really shitty and fucking moronic way, a logical way to fucking define and thus count these stats and this count people as homeless. It really is. It's fucking stupid. So there's way more than 4,000 people unaccounted for then, and unknown if they're actually homeless, because if that's your definition to be counted, holy fucking shit, that's so dumb. That is so moronic. So remember what I said. I guaranteed, I literally said this live. I literally said, I guarantee that instead of 12,000, I think it said literally 18 to 20,000 is what I really felt was the actual number. But then if they already have basically 17,000 here, then actually the odds are it's going to be 24 to 28,000 people are homeless. And it's just that this discrepancy and the discrepancy are described before then scrolling down here and then finding out this is their definition, how they count people, that means that there's guaranteed to be at least 24, 28,000 people in the Portland metro area that are homeless. This, of course, isn't just in Oregon. This is now including the Vancouver area, which people rarely do, including here or in Washington. But like, look at this spike, dude. At the end of the year, from July, in August up through September and October, just a skyrocket. So a load more people all of a sudden became homeless between July and October. Actually, that might be August and October. It's August. And that's substantial. I think also this statistic, by the way, actually, this graph really reflects that avoidance / that self-sabotage that I talked about really early on, and then kind of some of the things I've alluded to here, because permanently housed, boom, 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 right? Seems pretty decent. But then look at these numbers. Move to inactive, meaning that I'm assuming, right, that they're not in they're not in the program / in housing, right? Who were previously on our by name list of people experiencing homelessness, but they haven't used services recently, so they're considered inactive. See, that's exactly it, right? They most likely people removed from the list for other reasons. So yeah, effectively, that's probably the majority of it. This one I had here just because I thought it was fucking hilarious, especially this discrepancy. Crime. Portland, Oregon rates as a city F in crime, as in there's tons of crime, but it also ranks A plus in safety. Wow, that makes total sense if you just don't think about it. People rated that live here, they rate it as A plus in safety, but still F in crime. It's so fucking funny. And then actually in tune with that, by the way, is hilarious, but also agrees with something here, which I find to be so funny. So median listing price year over year, obviously negative percentages means it's gone down in price, right? Yeah. Notice the largest, by far the largest decline in year over year median listing price is 21.5% decrease in the overall listing price of homes in 97006. I cackled my ass off when I saw that. I'm like, yep, that's exactly what I expected. Because I'm like, I bet that's because it has to do with all the fucking crime and all the other fucking petty issues and people problems we have out in this zip code. Because goddamn, because this is that zip code. And it's like, yep. Like even insurance policies, for the last 4 years, I think, 3 or 4 years, I think it's 3 years, have officially classified this zip code and also this neighborhood I live in as a high crime neighborhood and zip code / area. So as a result, that means your interest rates, not interest rates so much as your total fees, your total cost for your insurances skyrockets, especially car insurances seem to go through the roof. But yeah, I loved seeing that. I'm like, that's fucking funny. And then actually I went from there to this, and I saw the crime, the health safety A plus, but the crime was F. Like, sure. That feels right. Yep. But also there's another discrepancy here that you can probably notice, which is that amenities and commute and employment and health and safety are all A plus. Housing's a B plus, right? But especially the employment. Employment's A plus. Each of these things, but especially the employment, the housing, and the health and safety are the three statistics that are used the most to then piggyback off of, and then say that makes this area obviously way more livable and thus way safer, way healthier, infinitely less crime, way less poverty. Because crime and then poverty, both of those, like if you're poor, you're a criminal apparently. Like that's always been the weird correlation and statistic they always give. Is like this matter of fact, which obviously isn't true. Especially if this is true and legit, then that's a massive contradiction, because your crime's F, but your employment and your quality of life is an AA plus. This doesn't work at all. There's somewhere else I read that you have to make, if somebody made, I think it was like $103,000 a year median household income in the Portland area, you could pay, wait for it, 93% of your monthly mortgage rate each month. You couldn't even pay all of it. Couldn't pay all of it at $103,000 a year. Fuck my life. My biggest frustration with this topic, being impassioned about it, is the fact that nobody ever fucking, besides, like I said, nobody ever asked the people they're actually supposedly trying to help and protect, which is especially infuriating, but nobody ever fucking stops to think to actually realize what the root causes of a lot of the problems are at the core of this issue, and then address those and address them appropriately and completely dedicated, never backing out, never removing funding, going all in, all hands on deck like they need to. Because yes, we could have the Portugal model, which is not, obviously nothing's perfect, but it's really good. It's working really well in Portugal. It still is, somehow, despite all their other issues with like all this massive influx of immigrants and and expats from the US and from Britain and from all these other places, from Russia and all these other places where they're moving in. It's where they have a backlog that's years deep of filing through these people. They just can't get through it. They have other related issues, but yet somehow through that, and administrative issues, in other words, but yet somehow through that, this program has still worked. Their system has still worked for addiction treatment and all of that, with the decriminalization, again, coming last. If Oregon really was serious about that, they would have fucking, when they took all these like 4 or 5 or 6 different fucking trips to Portugal, they would have fucking actually asked them, how do you recommend we implement this? How did you implement it? And that would be the first question you ask is, how did you implement this? Explain to us step by step what the process was, how you kind of sold it to the voters, how you got the knowledgeable people you did, how you make it work still years now down the road. What were the steps you took to get to this point? Like, to make it fully open and official and go through, like, how long did it take you to get all your steps done? What was the order of the steps? That's the important common sense thing you're supposed to fucking do. They traveled there and they're like, oh yes, cool, yes. And then they posed in like these banquet dinners and all these fancy restaurants, Michelin star places, and then on the beach or whatever. And they'd be there for like a week and a half, and then they fly home and they do it again a few months to a year or two later. And they keep doing that. And it's like, fuck you guys. Fucking fuck you. Like, because they knew what they were doing, and they're like, oh yes, we're copying the Portugal model, we're learning from them. No, you're not, because you're doing what the US always does. You're doing the exact opposite. You're like, what did you do? Let's do it in reverse order, and let's bastardize and corrupt it so much more to where we make it our own. AKA, they're gonna just cut a bunch of corners, they're gonna cut a bunch of stuff out, and they're just gonna go for this one thing. And it's usually in the reverse order, like I said. It's at the other end of the line where it's supposed to be. And it's so frustrating, because it's like, you're not helping anybody. If you really were serious about this, you would have asked those fucking questions. You would have written it down. You would have recorded it in audio. You would have recorded it in video. You would have an email them to you. Like, you have them make a presentation and give it to you via some sort of a video or meeting platform or something, so that way you can actually have every last record of how they did it and how they made it work and how they continue to let it work and make it even better. And then that's what you would do, is you'd copy the step-by-step process. You don't just say, well, okay, yeah, there's all that, but you don't need that. Let's just decriminalize hard drugs, eh? Okay, cool. Let's do that. Even though we're going to promise the people and the voters that we need nearly $200 million for funding for this, because we're actually going to do the prospective research period onto how we start the first step, the actual first step, and trying to set up the foundations. And then we're just going to take that money, nobody's going to know where it's going to go, because we're just going to decriminalize. And then pretend nothing happened, have fun. Isn't it great? Welcome to Oregon. Especially Oregon voters, because once again, that's all they do. They just performatively dogpile on a certain thing. If it makes them look good, if it makes them feel good about themselves, if it increases their positive perception as an altruistic being, they'll jump on it. They'll dogpile on it, and they'll insist it's the best thing in the world. But God forbid, the moment that you question anything about it, or you ask them questions, and you ask them, did you do your research? Did you ask the people you're in question that you're supposedly gonna try to help, this helps you think? Did you ask them if they want this? Did you ask them if it makes sense? Did you ask them what they actually need, or what their actual thoughts are, or feelings, or no, you didn't fucking do that at all, because you never do, because you don't fucking care at all. You never have, and you never fucking will, because all it matters is at least you sound and look like an altruistic being that cares so much. And that's all that matters. Including because it's not just selling to the outside world and everyone around you. No, you're trying to sell yourself on that too. That lie that is a lie, but you're just committed to it way too much. Welcome to being an Oregonian, a Californian, or a Washingtonian 101. It's so frustrating. Or a college-age person, aka my age group. The majority of them, especially if they're female. For some reason, that cliche is literal factual reality. And I hate it. But I digress. So yeah, it's an important topic, and I wanted to talk about it. Nobody's gonna fucking watch this, and nobody's gonna watch, especially all of it. Nobody's gonna listen through it, because welcome to me functioning as I do. And I wish I could shut up, and I don't, because I am the way I am, and I have to live with myself. This is me every day. So like, God, I can't imagine how much more insufferable it must be for everyone else. But I genuinely try, and look at where it's got me. 2 hours later. Unfortunate. I genuinely try though. It is once in like every probably 100 to 150 videos I do, maybe a little more actually, that I'm actually find myself able to just stay on track, be concise, summarized, get it done in like 20 minutes, 15 minutes. It's weird how it only happens on like almost a patterned interval. My brain is my brain. I don't know why it is the way it is. I don't know why I am the way I am, but I am what I am. That I am. I think. Although I've only been told that I am me, myself, and I. But am I really? See, that's the question, because nobody asked that themselves before, have they? What if we don't actually exist? We're just told we exist. See, the important questions. And now I'm going to shut up. Okay. Yeah. I'm now having too much fun with that. Anyway, my throat is now very angry again, so I'm going to shut the fuck up. Happy New Year! Yay! And I'm going to go get hit by a bus.